Hello, this is Electron Man. In this video, I'm going to show a Frankensaw that I've built to solve a common carpentry issue that I have had. The common popular circular saw, great for cutting plywood 1x and 2x. The problem with the common circular saw is that only part of the blade can go into what you're cutting. In the case of a common 7 1/4 inch saw, the blade can only go about 2.5 inches deep. This is not even enough to cut a common 4x4 without cutting from the other side. Oftentimes, one can't get to the other side, or there's something like sheeting on the other side that you don't want to cut through. There are larger circular saws, up to about 16 inches, but I could imagine these could be very difficult to use on a vertical surface, or worse yet, above your head. With the chainsaw, almost the entire length of the blade can be used for cutting. In this case, this is an electric 8-inch pole saw. Although, unless you're a chainsaw carver, it is difficult to make square right-angle cuts with a chainsaw. By combining the body and base plate of the circular saw to the pole saw, I am able to make deep, square, controlled cuts. I started by removing the blade, the shroud, and the motor from the circular saw, leaving just the base plate and center part of the body along with the switch. I started reassembling the saw by removing the plastic pieces on the end of the motor and placing them back into the case. I then drilled a hole in the top of the saw and routed the switch wires out the top of the case. Note that there are 2 holes because originally I was not going to put the center plastic pieces back in, but come to find out that they're a structural part of the saw, so they're needed for structural support. I then reinstalled the shroud and cut it in 2 using an angle grinder, leaving only the back portion of the shroud as support for the pole saw. The pole saw is connected to the body of the circular saw using the top 2 mounting holes on the circular saw where the gearbox mounted. There is a 3/4 inch piece of wood used as a spacer. The pole saw is also mounted to the shroud of the circular saw using 2 number 8 screws. There is also a nut on both sides of the shroud so that the bar of the pole saw can be adjusted to be square with the base plate of the circular saw. On the inside of the pole saw, just above the brown line that marks where the oil tank sits, are the 2 screws that go into the body of the circular saw. On either side of the bearing, you can see the 2 screws that mounts to the shroud of the circular saw. The wires from the switch of the circular saw are connected to the power input wires of the pole saw. The problem with the way the pole saw is mounted, the blade, or the chain, turns the opposite direction for the way that it should be cutting through the wood. To get it to go the other way, the motor needs to be reversed in direction. To do this, the wires going to the brushes of the armature of the motor need to be swapped. This is the white and black wire that loops above the motor. The teeth of the pole saw were hitting the base of the circular saw, so I cut them off with an angle grinder. I then reinstalled the bar and chain on the pole saw and adjusted it to be square to the base plate of the circular saw. With the base plate all the way up, the approximate cutting depth of the bar and chain is 7 inches. If I had more time, I would have liked to put the pole saw on a slide so it could be adjusted in depth straight up and down, although it can still be adjusted in depth by adjusting the base plate of the circular saw. With the circular saw base plate fully down, the depth of the blade is approximately 4 inches. This saw can easily cut through multiple stacked up 2x4s. By adjusting the blade depth, one can easily cut through a 4x4 on end without cutting through the sheeting on the other side of the 4x4. If you like this video, click the like below. If you'd like to see other videos like this one or about electronics, click subscribe below.